I think it goes without saying for anyone who's been paying attention to this Alberta election that one of the most infuriating things has been the media's absolute lack of attention on the kind of crazy candidates the NDP is running. I know that the media's all over it whenever a UCP candidate says something slightly stupid, or like Danielle Smith has some sort of thing she said on a radio show taken out of context 5, 6, 7 years ago. But like, goodness, can no one pay attention to some of these NDP candidates? Well, like, I'll just go through just a few of them, and if you dig deep enough on any of them, they usually hold some sort of crazy socialist opinion or some other sort of weird nonsense that we'll get into. But like, just right away, Calgary East candidate Rosemond Valencia effectively thinks that Alberta is a racist society. He quoted Angela Davis saying, in a racist society, you can't just be not racist, you have to be anti-racist. Stupid quote. First off, but on top of that, he was posting that quote alongside photos of Alberta, like an Alberta protest he attended, which is effectively saying that Alberta is the racist society in this context. And at the same time, he's saying that he's attending marches with anti Semitic groups and he's quoting anti Semites like Angela Davis and others because, I guess Rosemond Valencia doesn't think that he's capable of being racist or intolerant. Then we can just move on to Parmeet Bopari, who's running in Calgary Falconridge for the NDP, who's just openly a Khalistani. He's just openly in favor of violent Sikh separatism in Punjab. And before anyone sort of says that crap where they're like, are you trying to attack someone for being Sikh? The vast majority of Sikhs do not support Khalistani nonsense. And this guy's allowed to run. It's actually his second time running for the NDP. And just the media doesn't care. The NDP doesn't care. Even though, the Khalistani movement led to the Air India bombing, which killed over 200 Canadians traveling from Montreal to London. But I guess who really gives a crap? And then we have a candidate for the NDP up in Edmonton, Jody Calhoun Stonehouse, who posted this that says communism is the horizon, queer indigenous feminism is the way. Now, does that seem like someone to you who is a reasonable representative of who Albertans are? Even if you go to the most progressive riding in this entire province, you're going to have a lot of people looking at you funny if you come to them and say, hey, communism's on the horizon and queer indigenous feminism is the way. Like, they'd lock you up. They'll put you in a padded cell. But again, it doesn't even end there. We have Gurinder Brar up in Calgary North, and this man is a current MLA, and he was posting things endorsing the idea of violent revolution. At the same time, he was tacitly praising Mao from China, one of the greatest mass murderers of all time, and then also posting things about Karl Marx and whatnot. Again, find me a UCP candidate who has said anything about someone as radical as Karl Marx or Mao or Chairman Mao in a even slightly positive way. You're going to have a hard time. Like, they have to usually find that if a UCP candidate's been in the same room as someone we find distasteful, regardless of what they think of them, that's a story. But to the mainstream media, several NDP candidates praising communism or effectively holding communist opinions just does not at all even register as something that should be a story. So we have this other lady, Liana Peva, who's the NDP candidate up in Peace River, and thankfully she's very unlikely to win considering it's such a rural conservative riding. But she literally endorsed the idea that, well, people are happier if they own less stuff. And I understand that she's kind of doing this from the minimalist angle, but at the same time, she's endorsing commune style living and then constantly attacks capitalism and then sings the praises of socialism, in which sometimes she just sort of labels things that are obviously not socialism as socialism. She thinks that the government building roads is socialism, which is completely ridiculous. The government building roads does not mean that the government owns the means of production in society. But whatever, that's just the typical NDP candidate. She's a socialist communist, but also doesn't even really understand her own ideology. And then you even get other NDP candidates who just think that we should just get rid of the Catholic school system and probably any other religious school system by that, from based off the fact he wants to get rid of the Catholic school system, I really couldn't see him wanting to keep any other ones around, let alone charter schools or homeschools. I think that was Nathan Ip, and he's running somewhere in Calgary. Hopefully he also loses. But think about all this stuff that's out on the NDP, and I've only scratched the surface of it. I know Jonathan Bradley over at the Western Standard. I highlighted some of his articles here. He also has Rod La Jolla up in Edmonton. He was leading a Communist Party of Alberta march through the streets. And he's also had a bit of a history of praising Hugo Chavez and generally being in favor of any sort of South American socialist dictatorship. But think about all that stuff, and then think about the fact that they go after and UCP candidates for saying that you might have an increased chance of having a heart attack for being overweight. It's it's insane that you couldn't get anyone from CTV News, CBC, Global City to cover any of this stuff. But they will cover just random kind of comments that, a Danielle Smith or any other UCP candidate has made over the past 5 years, and some of them are maybe warranted for the media to cover. But there's this double standard where if you say something mild that's even true, like Chelsea did out in I forget, wow, I can't even remember the writing, but yeah, the lady who is a doctor who said that being overweight can cause health problems. That's something that was covered, and the media went after her for days. Yet no one's going to go after Gurinder Brar for supporting violent communist revolution, or Parmeet Bopari for supporting a violent extremist religious movement that wants to establish a theocracy in the Punjab region, in which it's probably just a project in order to try and give Punjab over to Pakistan. That's not a concern. Who gives a crap? But like Rosamond Valencia, hyper progressive candidate going to marches with Justice for Palestinians, who has a history of beating up Jews in downtown Calgary, nothing to see here. Like it is startling how many communists there are in the NDP. And again, it's not even like I'm just sort of cherry picking some stuff from the NDP and sort of trying to misrepresent them. Like, oh well, they're not really that bad, but if you like, they're not really that bad, and I'm just sort of skewing things. They literally declare themselves a democratic socialist party in their own constitution. It is not even hidden. It's the first line of their constitution, or I think it's like line 1.03. They could remove that line in any AGM they want. They just never have, because frankly it represents them. Even the federal NDP have removed their commitment to democratic socialism. Like the Alberta NDP's constitution literally still says the purpose of the party is to promote the principles of democratic socialism and establish and maintain a democratic socialist government in the province of Alberta. That is, I'm pretty sure, word for word exactly what the constitution says. And I know that Rachel Notley is very good at coming off as a moderate, but if she was to win the Alberta election, the NDP was to form a government, they're not going to win by a big margin. They would have a very slim majority, and all these crazies I've highlighted could potentially be in the party caucus and could control what the party passes, because it only takes 3 or 4 of them to hold out on legislation to demand even more radical legislation. So when us here at Stop the NDP are telling people to get out and vote, it's not just because, well, we don't really like the NDP, we don't agree with all their stuff. It's because they actually have a real chance of forming government. And whatever you think of the NDP, it's much worse when you look into them further. The sorts of radical ideologies just tolerated in the party would never be tolerated in any conservative party from the right, nor would it even be tolerated in the Liberal Party. Like, the Liberal Party is deeply corrupt, but they usually don't allow this sort of college campus radicalism into their party. Like, these are 40-year-old people who still believe communism or socialism are good ideas. That's not someone you want passing legislation and controlling the economy in this country or province.